Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to take a call on this bill and to thank the Minister for his introduction. And Labor is supporting the bill at least to select committee, and we'll be interested to see what technical arguments are raised by submitters at that point. Mr. Speaker, it is interesting to note the context in which we are debating this bill. Yet another important step in the great tax debate has unfolded before us in the last couple of weeks, and it pays, I think, sir, to recall some of the salient events that have led us to this point today. First, there was the great global financial crisis that began in September 2008. Then there was an election in November in which the incoming national government promised 3 years of income tax cuts. Then in December of last year, the House was thrown into urgency, sir, to pass the first step in a change that would result in 3% of New Zealanders, the top 3%, getting 30%, one-third nearly, of the tax reduction. Then Budget 09 effectively gutted the New Zealand Superannuation Fund with a decade of deferrals of contributions, which no amount of papering over the cracks, as is being attempted in this bill, can disguise. That fund, sir, is now some $35 billion projected in arrears by the time those deferred payments are lost. And, sir, a new survey out by Shape NZ has told us that 53% of New Zealanders, more than half, do not believe John Key that it is possible to both defer payments to the superannuation fund and maintain existing levels of entitlements. It is a mathematical nonsense, sir, unless the government is saying that in addition to writing off tens of billions of dollars of pollution subsidies on our young people, they are also going to make them catch up the difference that they allege today's taxpayers cannot afford at a time when there are half the taxpayers per capita or per retiree trying to pay those bills. Sir, retirement savings portability is a good idea in principle. Subject to the detail, Labor is prepared to support this provision to the Select Committee. But New Zealanders are right. They are deeply concerned about the provisions that this government has instituted that undermine the security that they will have in retirement and undermine the New Zealand Superannuation Fund. Sir, it is an irony that in the Crown accounts released last week, sir, the government's bacon has been saved by the increase in value of assets of the two funds that it has alleged were in crisis that it ceased paying into, the New Zealand Superannuation Fund and ACC. Were it not for those, sir, the Crown's books would be in way worse shape. And the excuse from the government is that, hey, we haven't got a cash surplus, so we can't afford to invest. Well, that's great. It says, sir, that people will only invest if they're in cash surplus situations, notwithstanding the rate of return. And that's clearly nonsense, because the New Zealand Superannuation Fund long-term average rate of return is 10.25%, according to their latest annual report, 10.25%. And the cost of capital to the government's around half that. So the government is foregoing just about doubling its money because of this vain principle that is really disguised for something else, which is that it never believed in the Cullen Superannuation Fund. One can only ask, if they'd changed the name to the English Fund, whether they would have discovered a newfound love for it. It's petty politics, sir. No amount of papering over the cracks with this worthy attempt at a bill is going to change the fact that National has gutted New Zealand superannuation and that a majority of New Zealanders no longer believe John Key. They didn't believe him on the 3 years of tax cuts. They weren't surprised when the promise was broken, and they don't believe him that he can maintain entitlements to superannuation and cease pre-funding. Sir, savings and KiwiSaver, which this bill deals with, are an important topic to all New Zealanders, or at least they should be, because this government has said that it cares about the fact that our tradable sector's in decline. And yet it turns a blind eye to the biggest part of our deficit, our current account deficit, which is the financial deficit. It is the outflow of funds because our financial sector does not save enough, New Zealanders don't save enough in it, and because the profits are flowing out of the country to those who own our financial institutions. And all New Zealanders should be concerned that we are having to borrow more to cover that deficit, and they should be very worried that this government's only solution is to flog off what is left of the family silver to try to fix up that gap rather than address it at source. And I would have thought there were little doubt that KiwiSaver was a step in the right direction. Not the last word, but a very healthy step in the right direction of lifting the New Zealand savings rate. So what has this government in its wisdom done? When it came into office, it cut by half the incentives for New Zealanders to increase their savings through KiwiSaver. Cut by half the incentives for KiwiSaver, short-sighted, ridiculous policy, back to 75, back to the ghost of Muldoon, which, by the way, of course, stalked the 2025 report. In the last week, we've got Don Brash rising from the crypt again, and we've got John Key ritually disowning the product, even as he invests another $300,000 in paying for it. And what did that report say? Not enough to have a 30-cent tops tax rate. That's too timid, I see. Roger Douglas nodding vigorously, or maybe he's just asleep. Nodding vigorously. No, he's awake. He's smiling, I think. Well done, Sir Roger. Well done. He is alive. Well, he is alive. He is alive. Sir Roger's smiling because he knows that one day when the Maori Party's got what it wants, the government will have to fall back on the ACT Party to pass legislation, and then he'll drag the 2025 report and all that it contains out of the closet and say to the government, that is the price of doing business. And what is it? A 20% flat tax rate and a cut of the minimum wage by a quarter. For a cabinet minister, $600 a week extra. For a worker on the minimum wage, $100 less when they're already struggling, down from $500 to $400. And I say to Bill English, who's sitting here with a great interest in this debate, say to Bill English, yes, I see the Minister of Revenue straining his head, the boss, where is he? Where is he? But I can't refer to that. But Bill English taking a great interest in this debate because we know that Bill English is so fiscally prudent that he believes it's impossible to live on $400. Goodness me. So there's that minister presiding over a bill that papers over the cracks of fundamental contradictions in this government's tax policy. They've gutted KiwiSaver, they've gutted New Zealand superannuation, and they are trying to place a veneer on it, sir, a veneer that they can just take their money across the Tasman and go retire in sunny Queensland and she'll all be right. Is that the government's solution to closing the gap with Australia, to export older New Zealanders? Are they going to try and raise the national IQ or raise the national income by exporting our senior citizens? Is that what lies at the heart of this debate? Is that what's behind this bill? Because we've seen nothing more sensible out of that 2025 Task Force report. Nothing more sensible at all. A return to the failed policies of the past. An absolutely shameless shift of net income from the poor to the rich. At the same time, a gutting of the New Zealand Super Fund and a gutting of KiwiSaver, just while the assets in those funds have saved the Crown's bacon, as revealed in the last monthly government accounts. Sir, this bill deserves to be scrutinised. Labor will support it to a select committee, but it can do little to save the contradictions already built into this government.
Craig Foss.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Talking of contradictions, Mr Speaker, I'm not quite sure